David Sanger. My colleague and I, Carl Cannon, talked to Michael Hayden as part of the series a few weeks ago. Fascinating guy, former head of the CIA, someone who figures somewhat prominently in your book.
That's right.
And one of the things that he said is that his experience when he was in the Air Force was that we were doing cyber strategy, and the Russians were doing sort of communication strategy.
Information warfare.
Information warfare. Tell me about that. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And why is that important?
Mike's got it absolutely right. So information warfare precedes the invention of the internet, the computer, so forth, okay? Goes back to ancient Greece.
I should say, and I said this to Michael Hayden and he kind of shot me down, but we're pretty good at information warfare. That's part of what, when we think of...
We once were.
Well, yes, but when we think of the war of ideas or hearts and minds, we generally have a feeling that our ideas are universal in appeal and that our openness is a positive
But I'm not sure I would call that information warfare. That is sort of, the appeal, the soft power of your, to use Joe Nye's phrase, of the appeal of your society, and we've counted on that. But back in, say, Stalin's days, they would buy off reporters at farm newspapers in the middle of the country and post these false stories and hope that word spread that way. In the cyber world, the only difference is that you can post these stories and this false stuff sitting in St. Petersburg at the Internet Research Agency and spread them far more quickly and do a much larger volume of them and have vastly better graphics and not have to worry about how you're going to get it into the farm newspaper because you're putting it on Facebook. Right.
And the rapidity with which it
gets repeated, gets amplified. So it's old techniques that get supercharged by going through the modern technology. So the Russians have always thought of information warfare on the spectrum with cyber. We came to these issues from sort of Mike's old world of signals intelligence, right? That's what the NSA started as, right? We find secrets, things that are encrypted, we unencrypt them, you give it to policymakers and say, here's what the Russians and the Chinese are really saying to each other in what they thought was a classified network.
Right.
That has now moved because so much of the NSA is all about causing cyber effects because we now have the interface of the digital world, the internet world, with the physical world. So you can try to do some things defensively about information warfare. There's a big section of the book about how the United States tried and largely failed to stop ISIS's spread of propaganda. And they failed because you could take the stuff down, but it turned out it was on 5 more servers spread out from Germany to Canada, and it would just reappear later on, and you weren't really accomplishing very much for more than a day or two. Or you can go to the physical effects side. You can do what the United States and Israel did to those centrifuges, which was change the programming so they sped up and slowed down until they blew apart, or manipulate that data in the North Korean rocket system. So that has become the sort of new bridge in the physical world. We've never really focused very well as a democracy in doing the information warfare part and the fake news part. And then, of course, we've got the additional problem that what began being understood 2 years ago as Russian propaganda, as fake news, something you made up, is a phrase that got hijacked by President Trump and many of his supporters to try to describe the work done by real news organizations that do real reporting, including the one you're sitting in.
Yeah, Joe Nye draws this distinction now between soft power and sharp power, which I think is sort of an interesting distinction. And I buy that there's, but still you would think that one of the things that makes the United States hard to crack from a sharp power point of view is the fact that it's got this large and robust and free media landscape. And that it's true the Russians can post something on Facebook. I guess this brings me to this question of asymmetry, which is another sort of strategic concept. I mean, one of the asymmetric things, at least in the old day when it came to information warfare, or propaganda, if you will, was that if we were trying to reach someone in the Soviet Union with Voice of America, the Soviet Union with Voice of America, they had the official channels and they had Voice of America and Radio Free. In other words, we were sometimes 50% of the conversation. Now, they jammed us, all that sort of stuff, but still, we were at the table in an information scarce environment. We live now in an information rich environment. Should we really be that worried, I guess, that the Russians are posting a few Facebook things and they're almost, some of them are laughable almost. I mean,
Yep.
people think they're very effective, but like 99% of the stuff that comes across my Facebook feed or my Twitter feed, it's noise.
That's right. So there are different theories on this. Theory number one is, who cares? They'll get washed away in the river of data that we've got.
Right.
And that's the theory under which the Russians may not have had much effect on the 2016 election. I've heard Jim Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, make the argument recently he thinks it actually did make a big difference in the election.
Yes, it's incredible. But yes,
I have
make that
not
argument.
seen the evidence of that, and it's not supported by the intelligence that at least the DNI's office made public when he was still there. Now, maybe his view has changed. Theory number two is we can't have foreigners inside our election system, and that's the theory under which it could make a difference. You'll never be able to measure the degree to which it has. But if there's that risk, and since we wouldn't allow foreigners to go take out political ads that you ran on TV, why should you allow them to do this on the internet? And my view of this is this was why we actually needed a sort of 9/11-like committee after the 2016 election, a commission that looked at the big lessons learned from the 2016 hacks. And not just the DNC hack, but the point I make in the book is that the Russians were inside the White House, the State Department, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and in each of those cases, while the U.S. government fought to get them out, it never made public that it was the Russians.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So Putin never paid a price.
Right.
Right? And I think that was quite critical, because if you're not going to pay a price for going into even the unclassified part of the White House thing, why would you think you'd pay a price for going into the DNC, which is basically run by a bunch of college kids, right?
Right.
Or staffed by them. So the theory number two is ban the foreigners. The problem with theory number two is it contributes to the balkanization of the internet that we're already seeing happen. So the Chinese have built a sort of China-only internet. You don't see Google on it. They've got
Right.
Baidu. You don't see Facebook on it. They've got their own equivalent of Facebook, so that it lends itself to central control. You're seeing the Russians do pretty much the same thing. So the big question that's coming out of this is this world that we envisioned in which the internet was going to be the great unifier, which we were going to spread the ideas of democracy that you said before we were pretty effective at, is it actually going to go the other way? That people have figured out how to so manipulate the internet that you can wall off your population.
So I did promise that we would tell our viewers about thumb drives, which
Sure.
just tell us that story. That's a fascinating story of how thumb drives,
Sure.
little low budget things you stick in the side of your
Yeah, you do get them
computer.
free at
Right.
conferences, right. If you get one free at a conference, wait till you get home and put it behind the right rear tire of your car and go over and crush it, okay? So early in the book is a description of what happened when the Pentagon first discovered that there were Russians inside one of their classified networks, the CIPRNet, which is later actually what the WikiLeaks documents all came through. They came through CIPRNet in a separate hack. And this was 2008, was the fall. Barack Obama was on his way to the presidency. And the NSA and the Defense Department discover that the Russians are deep inside these systems, and they try to figure out how. And what they discovered was that in a parking lot at a base in the Middle East, they had littered the place with some of these thumb drives, each of which was infected with a program that was essentially a call home to Moscow beacon. And as people would put these in the thumb drives, they would begin to send everything that was inside the classified network out.
Right.
Because the thumb drive was already basically into the circuitry. Later, the Russians got better. We now know of at least one case of an NSA employee who brought unauthorized material home and put it on his computer, and his computer had Kaspersky, a Russian company's virus software. Now, antivirus software goes down to the base level of your computer because it's got to make sure that nothing has gotten in. It detected the code names for some key US programs and beamed them out. We don't even know if this was with Kaspersky's knowledge, right back to Moscow.
Right, right.
So the thumb drive, the antivirus program, the things you're doing that you think you're doing to protect yourself, antivirus programs being the great example, can end up creating the vulnerability you're trying to avoid.
And is it true that the Pentagon ended up putting super glue in the USB ports of those computers to keep you from putting them in?
I discovered this from really high-level sources. You know, in the course of like making my way through military bases, just doing the ordinary reporting we do here at the New York Times, I would keep running across people whose computers were super glued across the thumb drive, and I kept saying, "Why is that?" They say, "Oh, they made us do that after the big hack in '08."
There's more information about cybersecurity, including how U.S. military strategy is evolving, on our website. Just go to realcleardefense.com and you'll get a prompt to go to our cybersecurity homepage.